So with this, a big round of applause for Marcus. Marcus, please.
Thank you very much. So he did it again. He called me again a veteran. Last time I already felt bad about that. So sounds always like being very, very old and having spent a lot of time with IT stuff, which actually I did. About Fujitsu's storage strategy, but the reality is this is much more about your storage strategy, because everything is changing. The strategy you probably had for the last 10 years in storage cannot stay the same. And the reason for that is the first thing that we want to look at, and that is what is happening in data centers out there. So Miho mentioned, we as Fujitsu, we are operating like 100 data centers, so we are very close to these changes, and it's important to understand that, to see what do we need to do in storage to cope with that. And I don't want to bore you to death with 1 million of these red bubbles, but it gives you a visual idea how fundamental the change is. So let's just look at some of them. For example, the first one, which is called workload realignment. Strange phrase. What it actually wants to say is that the data centers that we use today in the transformation time and digitalization, they're full of different paradigms than the ones we currently still have in place. And that has to do with different applications, with all the stuff that we learned from the cloud operators. So that is changing. The second one, with a very immediate impact, there is a trend called hyperconvergence and software-defined everything. So Miho talked about our PrimeFlex portfolio. That is a very good example how the different things move together, grow together, and at the same time, how infrastructure becomes so much software-defined. The platforms becoming very similar, differentiation is in software. And that is also true for the network. The network has been, when I started in IT, the network was the big unknown, the big black hole, and only the most advanced specialists did know what to do. This is changing. It's becoming software-defined, it's becoming simple, and you get to completely different cost levels as well. All these changes have a direct impact on cost, and we will come to that. Smart data center. What is behind smart? The fact that I haven't talked to any customer of us in the last 10 years who said, oh, good news, data is growing rapidly, it's growing exponentially, and I get every year new people and a bigger budget to cope with that. That is not happening. So the question is, how can infrastructure make your life so easy that you can cope with all these additional challenges? That is what IDC calls a smart data center, automation and simplification of processes so you can work with that. So the thing is, companies who continued with their infrastructure as in the past will have a competitive issue, because all competition in your market will move into these different infrastructures where IT is adding value because it's helping you to address completely new use cases, where you get different speed and different level of automation, and that has a direct impact on cost and a direct impact on how you can act in your markets. So ultimately, we all go through these stages of change. So it's not good enough to have a bulk of hardware in the data center. You actually come to a point where you do virtualize, where you automate, and ultimately embrace the cloud. The thing is, the cloud is great. Cloud is nice because you get agility. You can, in no time, you can have a virtual machine at your hand. It has a very interesting cost point. But on the other hand side, if it's core IP, if the crown jewels of your company, would you trust them somebody else, somebody where you don't even know where they store your data? Probably not. So in reality, when we come to the stage 4, to the perfect setup of a data center, you will have some data in the cloud, you will have some data on premise, you will have some data in a virtual machine environment. That's what we are going for. And actually, we can help you to go through all these phases of changes and get the perfect mixture of all these different approaches. What is the impact on storage? Well, fundamentally, we still talk about making these systems faster to support that. We talk about the scalability because of this data growth. We talk about cost, and we talk about smart data center automation to get the effort out of the operation in the data center. In the past, basically, we all had one design of storage. And for the sake of making it more easy, we use the metaphor of a beer for that. But what is changing now is that you get a zoo of different storage systems to support these different requirements. For example, the Rabbit, the all-flash system, super fast storage. The swarm of fishes, standing for the swarm intelligence for hyperscale systems that cope with these multi-petabyte of storage requirements, or even very fancy animals without a name that stand for hyperconvergence. So when to use what storage? Let's start with the flash revolution. Flash has really completely changed the storage industry. Who of you is running an all-flash appliance? You might raise your arm. I can still see you, don't worry. Okay. That is happening now. So a couple of years ago, we started with customers like the GKL. That's a market research company. They earn their money by understanding the behavior of buyers very, very well. So really gathering a lot of data, aligning with them with complicated algorithms, and then getting some kind of recommendations for their customers. Heavy computing took them hours. They introduced the Eternus DX600, all flash by that time, plus the extreme cache, super fast system, and that turned their business model upside down. So all of a sudden, they were able to come to conclusions in real time. So the service levels they can give to their customers was getting so much better. And then, of course, you can charge more. So it was a very beneficial impact on their business model. So that was the beginning of all flash, when it was only about speed, and you can charge a lot because you were fast. But flash has a multitude of benefits. If you are working with storage today, if you are still using hard disk drives, then you are used to the fact that hard disk drives tend to fail. And if you have 10 drives, maybe you have never seen a failure. But if you're a big shop, big data center, and you are running with petabytes of storage, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 drives, then you know that every day you see disk drives failing. You have your private stock of replacement disk drives. And when they are failing, you have to do a rebuild. And if it's protected with RAID 5, and you're still having load on that, the rebuild of a large disk drive, let's say 8 terabyte, can take a long time, can take a week. And if something happens during the rebuild, well, your RAID 5 is not in place because there is one extra bit of information missing. So in that week, you can just pray that nothing happens. So disk drives have their operational moments. And that's why many companies are really fed up with using disk drives in the storage environments and firefighting all the time if something happens. And that's a very typical example that flash is really moving from the exception where it was only about performance at any cost to a situation where you would want to deploy flash in any situation in your data center as mainstream storage, maybe with the exception of archiving, but tier 1, tier 2 storage is moving now mainstream into flash. And the reason is it is fast, it's still fast, but it's also now very reliable, more reliable actually than hard disk drives are. And it's also becoming very affordable. Dedicated companies have talked about that for the last couple of years. It didn't happen. Now is the time. Now it is happening. And now it's the time for you to consider very carefully what kind of storage infrastructure do I take for my data center? Is the time right for me to go for flash? And don't be confused by technology. I just share those with you because you will be hammered. You are probably already be hammered by SLC, MLC, TLC. That is about how the NAND flash look like, whether they have a single level cell or a multi-level cell or a triple level cell. This is not important. The important thing is what is here on the very left-hand side from my point, the DWPD number, the drive writes per day. The drive writes per day tell you how many times a day can I write the full capacity of the SSD media. So we come from a situation where this was a very high value 10. We are now in like 1. It'll be going down further to 0.5. And that is the only thing you have to look at. If you are running a flash system with a high transaction database, then you should worry about a DWPD number which is a bit higher, maybe 1 or +1. If you are mainly reading, for example, you can completely forget about this. So the only point about SSDs is how much write traffic do I put on them? Reading is for free, writing is having a penalty, and that's where you need to look at the DWPD value, and those values are guaranteed by Fujitsu. So once you have decided this is a perfect fit, you have a guaranteed reliability. So we see flash is going mainstream. That changes the requirements to the storage system. So in the old days, in the first days of all flash, when it was only about performance, these systems were only able to deliver performance. It was hard to integrate them. They were islands of storage, completely different way to manage them. At the end, a very costly thing. If you want to do flash everywhere, then it should not be super expensive, yeah? That is not the point. So, requirement now is that the management should be integrated with the management of the disk systems, with the management of your whole data center. You should be able to mirror data, ideally between flash and your existing disk environment. You should be able to make a failover, a transparent failover. Quality of service, that you are able to guarantee the most important applications, that the users get reaction times in time. So you do not want to get calls from the HR department, our SAP system is so slow again, and it's all your fault, you are the storage guy. The eternal systems have an automatic quality of service system that makes sure that this does not happen. And that is also true for the flash systems. This is a little secret, so I was asked not to talk about that, but of course I couldn't keep that for myself. On the 12th of October, we are launching our new all-flash systems. That's how they look like. I was not allowed to use the name, but that's how they look like. They are derived from our DX design. They'll have a different name. They'll be block storage. They'll be super fast, even faster than today. They'll be featuring deduplication and compression to bring the cost per capacity further down. They will have automated quality of service, and they will feature a storage cluster, the transparent failover, so the best way the industry has to offer to achieve high availability for storage. And we'll come to that. So I didn't want to go into any competitive details, but if you just compare our Eternus all-flash design with what I call the one-trick pony systems, all these startups that have been specialized only in all-flash, and also with the pure software-defined designs that you see today, the things you should look at, if you decide to purchase flash, the factors to look at is response time. How fast is the system answering? It's not just about IOPS. IOPS is important, but the response time is the one thing you cannot change. So this is super important. Eternal systems are leading in response time. Capacity, of course, the management capabilities. That is where the hidden cost is. That is where you pay extra for OPEX if you don't sort that out from day one. Reliability, I don't have to talk about that one. And the variety of use cases the system can support. How well do they integrate with their snapshots into business applications? In the early days, all flash was fast, so it was for VDI, for databases, for trading. And now that we move mainstream, we are supporting everything. So we talk about all the VMware environments, we talk about Hyper-V environments, we talk about collaboration, e-commerce, whatever. So that also means that the software, the management software has to support all these scenarios. And the good thing is it does. Now let's look at something very tangible. How does such a new flash system compare to a traditional design? And we have taken a system for a capacity of 30 to 40 terabytes at a speed of 90K IOPS. If you want to do that, and you take the latest, greatest Eternus DX system with hard disk drives, you end up with this kind of rack full of systems. That is a good solution. 22 8 units, 4,000 watts of power. And then you achieve those numbers. What do you think, how big is the system if you use an all-flash system? It's very, very small. It's just a 2U system, and it actually wins in all the different disciplines. It offers you 4 times the IOPS, 500 times faster response time, 500 times. The density obviously is 11 times higher. The major savings on the operational point are within power and cooling. Obviously, flash chips consume so much less power, and if you consume less power, then you need less power for cooling, so the savings are 75%. Maintenance. Obviously, if you have this kind of form factor, the savings for maintenance are dramatic. And that is a comparison with a new system. In your data center, most of your systems are old, 2 years, 3 years. So they have different hard disk drives in here. So these factors easily are not 75 better in savings. It's probably like 150%. It's probably not 8 times less cost for maintenance. It's probably 15 or 20. So when you're considering your storage, it makes so much sense to do the math, to look at the complete cost, including power, including cooling, including maintenance, and you will see how soon you get a return of that investment, very soon. And that is why this is changing, because if you just keep what you have and your competitors use latest, greatest, they have different cost points and they have the capabilities to have different cost points in the offers as well. And talking about cost, so just with this example calculation, the price per IOPS for the disk drive one here in this example is 150. For the flash system, it's only 50 cents. Factor 3 also in cost. So a massive disruption of the storage world. And the good thing is that is not even the full story, because if you deploy everything on flash, what do your storage administrators do during their normal working hours? They spend a lot of time with optimizing the storage system, tuning them for speed, making sure that they use the right kind of short stroking and putting the LUNs in the right place on the right media. With a flash system, you don't have to do that, because flash per se is so fast, you can put the data wherever you want to. So again, you save a lot of effort in terms of time of the admin, on top of all these things that we have seen. So flash, that is one thing that I really want to hope you take that away from here, that you need to have a look at your storage infrastructure, how to embrace flash, when to embrace flash. The other topic, which is a bit more futuristic, is where we use this image of the swarm of fishes, and that is the storage for the next generation, for the future design of storage systems. By the way, of course, they can also use flash, so that it's media independent. The thing is, if you are in a hybrid environment, as we discussed at the beginning, and you put some of your data, for example, to the Amazon Web Services using S3, and you decide that some of the data should rather stay with you, wouldn't you still want to have the agility and the cost points and the S3 interface of the public cloud, but just on your premises? Wouldn't that be the right way, so that you can easily say, okay, this data goes here, but this data, that stays here on my premise? What happens when the Internet of Things, as we heard about this early afternoon, is happening? So for example, you're a utility company, you have all these meters in the households, and now you switch into smart metering. All of a sudden, all these devices send data to you, a lot of that. You're a car manufacturer, you start autonomous driving, all the cars are sending data to you. So the reality of the Internet of Things is giving you even more data growth, and then you take your Hadoop installation. So you saw from Ehud's presentation, we have a wonderful solution called PrimeFlex for Hadoop. You do all this analytics, and again, petabytes of data. In the past, very often you would have thrown that away, but now you want to see patterns, you want to see how customer behavior is changing over time, so you want to keep those petabytes of data. How can you do that in a cost-effective way with fast access times? Or another example, this mode 2, we talked about these changes in the data center. Let's say you want to introduce your private Dropbox service for your employees, a sync and share service. The perfect storage for that looks very different from the storage you use today. And the system that would answer all these questions, that is something that we call the eternal CD10000. That is a system that is using a completely different approach to storage. It is completely software-defined, so we use standard building blocks on the hardware side. It's an object storage system. The thing is, whatever people tell you, when we are moving in the multi-petabyte area, 5 petabyte and beyond, traditional storage will not scale effectively. The only way how to stay in the scalability area is to use an object storage system. That does not necessarily mean that you have to access it through an object interface, but the core of the system needs to be object-oriented so you can reach this kind of scalability. CD10K is. It's a hyperscale architecture, so even now, we are now in version 2, so we did start like 2 years ago. This can scale to beyond 50 petabytes. And that is just a test constraint. So we could actually scale beyond that, but that is what our biggest customers are currently demanding. So that is a concept that can basically scale whatever is needed in the future. It's based on Ceph. Ceph is an open source software. Ceph is the most used storage software for OpenStack. So Fujitsu is very, very much committed to OpenStack. We have been going so far that we said we will transform all our internal IT systems over time to OpenStack. We are amongst the top 10 contributors to OpenStack. So that is one of the reasons why we decided to use at the heart of the system open source software. The other one is that we fundamentally believe that the power of open source is stronger than the development team of any single vendor ever can be. And of course, for you, as a user of that system, that is a tremendous advantage because you see innovation leaps that you will not see anywhere else. It's a tremendous movement. It's a storage system. So talking about Ceph and open source and OpenStack, of course you can download that from the internet and then you get all the do-it-yourself things. For a professional data center that is very risky, time-consuming, expensive, not to talk about security concerns, we package that for you. We create a complete, mature storage system out of that, including all the different services, including the capability to deploy that. So that's where you are on the safe track. And now you might say, okay, my use cases are not yet in the multi-petabyte range. I find this technology very interesting. I would want to learn about that. Why? Because of the migration to the next generation. That is actually a very practical point. Our biggest customers today with the DX8000, they are in 2-3 petabytes. And if they are buying today one of these systems and they are replacing some other storage system, it takes them about 2 years to do a full-blown migration from the old system to the new system. They keep the systems typically for about 5 years, so they have 1 year of operation, and then the next migration starts. Now let's imagine the system is bigger. Let's say it's now 10 petabytes. You can easily calculate that there is not enough lifetime of the system to do all these migration works. So the time you need to migrate is heavily influencing the time you operate a certain system. That is a completely unacceptable situation, right? And the CD10K design changes that paradigm. So if you look at a rough idea how such a system looks like, we have these 4 nodes. That's the minimum configuration. You're writing data to that system, and the data is automatically distributed. The system tunes itself. No administrator has to do that, so you save, again, in operations. So while the system is filling, it's creating redundancies, all the redundancies you need to create availability. At one point, the system will be completely full. And that is the point where in the past, you would have bought a new system. In this case, you are buying nodes. You're buying new nodes, and then the system automatically populates them. It still balances itself, so you have the same top performance better than before. And if you come to the point where you say, oh, these old nodes, they are eating energy, the media is not very good, so these were initially hard disk drive nodes, now I swapped to flash. how do I get rid of that? It's all full of data. Do I have to do a migration of the data? You don't have to do that. You just tell the system, I want to evacuate that. And then the system takes the data and redistributes that on all the new nodes, and you can switch off the old one and throw it out of the window without doing any harm. So you have the latest and greatest hardware, but it's still conceptually the same storage system, so there is no dedicated time for migration. This system solves the migration issue. So how to enter that? So obviously, buying 4 nodes of a system, that is pretty pricey. And currently, this is super new technology, so everybody's in the area of understanding where to use it, how to use it, getting familiar with that. And to make that easy, we have introduced something that we call the Quick Start Edition. It's basically just a server with the complete software stack, the software-defined stack from the CD10000. So we have virtualized that. So you have virtualized node, you have a management node on that. And it has the full functionality of a CD10K. So you can test the S3 interface with the applications you're running. You can administer the system. You get familiar with the interfaces. And you can find out where it fits and how you can use it. And once you have decided to do it and to keep it and to use it productively, then you just buy another 3 nodes and you have a full-blown CD10000 system. So that is the entry, the easy start into this next generation hyperscale storage. We are not doing very well in time, I must say. I hope you will stay with me when I go through some other exciting topics, but I will shorten it a bit so we have a chance to finish before dinner. But let me talk a bit about the beers, our currently great Eternus DX storage systems. And I think we will jump also about the examples. That is the family of systems we have. So we start very small, very affordable for medium-sized companies. The DX60 is our entry storage, and we start at a couple of €1,000. And we are scaling up to a DX8000, and I talked about that example with multi-petabytes of storage. And the great thing is, all these systems are running the same software. So if you have an admin who can handle the DX60, he'll also be able to handle the DX8000. If he can fly the small Airbus, he can fly the big Airbus. If you decide to move to the all-flash systems, the user interface, the admin interface, is still the same. So he can also fly the supersonic plane in the all-flash space. That is a perfect setup of growth in this traditional storage area. The thing is that we bring a lot of very, very powerful management software. One example is a company called Stechert Stahlrohrmöbel. They are building seats. So what you see here is a big hall, and they have been manufacturing the seats here. They are running SAP. And in the past, they did a backup of SAP once a day. So when there was data loss, they were getting back, in worst case, to the state of the day before. So 1 full day of extra work to get the data back in. That's not good enough anymore. We have a fantastic hidden jewel that is called ESM, the Eternus Snapshot Manager. That's an industry-leading tool to integrate snapshots with applications. And with the help of that tool and the CS800, which is a backup target, they were able to bring down this time spent from 1 day to 30 minutes. So every 30 minutes, they are running a backup of their SAP environment and making a copy of that. So the service level of the backup has been improved dramatically because of ESM. And this is also available also for our flash systems. I'll jump a bit here. Walser Privatbank. This is a bank, a private bank from Austria. That's why there are all these mountains. And they're also using the Eternus DX, and they're using the DX together with the storage cluster. Storage cluster, I mentioned it very quickly. When you're a bank, you want absolutely security that if one storage system fails for whatever reason, whether it's a fire or somebody did some damage or there is a hardware error, that you have the data on a second system. And you do not want that the service is interrupted. So what we invented here that is unique in the industry is something we call the storage cluster. So if one system fails, then automatically the other system takes over the task. How is it implemented? The other system tells the environment, oh, by the way, that's me. So they change the name. Pretty nice trick. And that is why the failover happens very, very fast. So normally, you have to certify with 1 million applications. You have to do scripting, a very complicated, time-consuming, unsecure, risky thing. With storage cluster, you don't have to. You just install that, and if something's happening, the server, the application, will not even notice that something has happened. Even Oracle, which is always very touchy about switching storage, it's happening so fast, it doesn't notice. So we did start to do that with Fiber Channel, and the good news is we just released storage cluster also for iSCSI. So you can start with the DX200, for example, using iSCSI, a very affordable solution for high availability for storage. Great technology, also available for our all-flash systems. Talked about this one. Virtual environments. We see that about 2/3 of our customers are using Eternus DX systems somewhat in the context of VMware, 2/3. How to make that simple? If you want to manage your storage only from vSphere, we can do that. VMware has invented something called vVol, virtual volumes, and we have been one of the first companies to support that. We have one of the deepest integrations. So if you want to use vVol, you can manage your complete Eternus DX from your VMware console. You don't even need a dedicated storage administrator. Again, smart data center, making life easier. And this is just a picture because it's nice. For the sake of time, I will jump over that. So we have talked about all these different animals. The beer, the very reliable Eternus DX that we have today. We talked about the new all-flash system, the rabbit. We talked about the swarm, the intelligent swarm of fishes. And Mehul actually talked about vSAN, which is a very nice example, Primeplex for vSAN, for hyperconverged. These animals have one thing in common. They all need data protection. And this is the airline from Portugal, TAP Portugal. They are one of our many airline customers. And they are doing their backup with an Eternus CS8000. Who of you has heard about the CS8000? One of these well-hidden secrets. The CS8000 is a world record holder. It's a world champion in terms of backup target, in terms of speed of backup, in terms of speed of restore, in terms of size of backup. So that is for large data centers. And the TAP Portugal is using that for very fast backups and for archiving. They are very happy about the admin savings because what the CS8000 basically does for you, it automates backups. It takes a lot of effort out of backups. And so at the end of the day, it's a dramatically reduced cost for your whole backup operations. We have a whole family of backup targets, backup appliances. And that is the CS8000 as the high-end large data center tool. We have the CS800, that is a deduplication appliance for medium-sized companies. And we have an integrated target, the CS200, that we do together with Commvault. So the backup software is already part of the box. That is a fantastic tool. If, for example, you use Primeplex for V-Shape, so you have your VMware environment in the box, and then you want to have a backup, CS200 does it. Let's look again on the CS8000 because it's the most differentiated one. We talked about the very fast backup. So if you have an issue with backup windows, which can happen when data is growing exponentially, the CS8000 will help you. And it will also make these super fast restores. The other completely unique thing is it brings high availability to the backup and restore thing. If you're in a situation that you lost data and you want to recover from a backup, the least thing you would need is that in this moment, your backup system doesn't work. The CS8000 is the life insurance for that critical moment in the life of your company. 24/7 operations. Sometimes people tend to use the dedupe appliance because some of our competitors say that's the one. The truth about dedupe appliances is they have a time for backup, they have a time for replication, and they have a time for housekeeping. So like 2/3 of a day, you cannot write a backup to that system and you cannot do a restore. If that is okay for you, then it's a good system. If you need 24/7 operations for backup and restore, then it's not. Then you need to go for a CS8000. Another example of a customer, and that is an interesting point. Two-site disaster resilience, so we can also do multi-sites for different data centers. The other important thing is, how many operators do you need to protect 600 terabytes of backups? We don't talk about 600 terabytes of data, we talk about the pure size of the backups they write every day to a CS8000, and they do that with 2 half-time admins. That's about the effort you save, because if you do that, for example, with dedupe appliances, you need plenty of them and you need plenty of operators. So dramatic savings in operational expenditure. Modern Bakery from Dubai, they are using PrimeFlex for SAP HANA, and they are doing their backup on the CS200. And one of the cool findings was, it's an appliance, so the implementation was so much faster than they expected it to be. So that's nice about our PrimeFlex things. That's also nice about the CS200. Implementation is fast because it's automated. Operation is automated. Big savings in both parts. So, little summary. We have looked at all these different animals from the zoo. I hope it was an exciting journey through that zoo. The new usage scenarios drive that, and you will have to make some critical decisions in the near-term future what storage architectures you want to trust your future on. And one big bet is certainly all-flash storage, and we would really recommend consider all-flash systems now for all use cases. That's a big change in infrastructure. Have a look at software-defined storage like a CD10K for new use cases. Make yourself familiar with that. It might not be necessary today, but tomorrow it will be. Hyper-converged approaches like vSAN, very exciting technology, very good use cases. And the good thing is, we as Fujitsu, we are driving the change. We are driving the innovation. We are very experienced in all these different fields. We have been in storage for more than 40 years, so we really understand inside out what is the best offering and how you can apply that. And don't forget about backup and archiving. There will be the day when you will be very happy that you thought about that. So, we are here to discuss the storage zoo with you. Thank you very much for listening. I hope there were some ideas that you can use for your life. So, thank you very much.